We're back.
We're back. And for those not in Nashville, we kind of sort of had a crazy night last night.
Yeah.
A lot of storms.
A lot of storms.
It's still going.
happening.
It's still going.
It's like a river out there.
Yeah, exactly.
We're committed.
Yeah.
We are committed to this podcast.
Just so you guys know.
I was the only one that didn't have a hat, so I have like the rain hair from when I
See, we
came
came
in and got
prepared.
poured
Rest
on.
us,
I know.
Yeah, no other option.
I was just
really
focused
today.
on getting here.
Your hair looks good though.
Well, thank
Yeah,
you.
you look great, X.
Yeah, there were rivers and
Oh,
all
yeah.
kinds of things that we
yeah.
had to drive through to get here, but it's going to be a great podcast today.
It's gonna be great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're super excited to be talking about networking and finding your creative community, finding your tribe, as we often say around here, and which is such an important topic, really, and something that I feel like we as a team talk about so much, in particular because of the online community we've fostered with Song Chasers. And so excited to dive into that topic today, which maybe to start the groundwork, we just talk a little bit about why it's even important to kind of find a creative community and why does it matter at all? And I think that the first thing that comes to my mind, at least, is just because you really can't do it any other way. Like, you need community in order to make it in the music industry. And so you might as well find the right one. First of all, like, if you're going to need community, like, you need to then the right one to kind of be able to push you forward. And yeah, I know that we often talk about just in Song Chasers and stuff like that, the importance of bringing your strengths together through co-writing, through collaboration, through learning from other industry professionals. Like, there's so many different reasons that it's important to network and collaborate and find your tribe. And Seth, I don't know if you want to jump off of that at all or have any things to add to that, but
Yeah, I mean, community's everything. I've said it so many times that co-writing really is the thing. I would not have the career I have today without co-writing. It's helped me become a better songwriter. It's helped me have exposure to cuts I never would have gotten otherwise. It's led to production work for us. It's everything. That's it. You said it well. I don't have a lot to add.
yeah, for sure. Riley, because of your experience both with co-writing and songwriting yourself, but also in kind of running our Song Chasers community and your experience there and seeing so many different interactions that have happened in our community, what would you say are some of the most common misconceptions that you come across?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we get a lot of questions. We hear a lot of experiences shared and otherwise. And so, yeah, I think there definitely can be some misconceptions about networking, especially in this industry. And I would say one thing, and I feel like maybe this is common sense, I don't know, but networking isn't always about getting something, more than giving and helping. And so I feel like people often think about networking as like asking for favors, and then, you get something in return, and there's always kind of more of like a transactional piece to networking. But I feel like, especially in the music industry, it kind of has to be built on genuine connection and mutual respect and kind of wanting to come up together. So I feel like that's definitely one thing. And another thing too, I feel like we have a conversation about this a lot in Song Chasers, is building up and networking with people that are on your level, like your peers, rather than like, you don't always have to be networking with somebody that is 30 steps ahead of you to find success, to be successful. And so there is definitely something to be said about finding your tribe with people that are on similar levels, that we're kind of building up together, or even maybe just a couple steps ahead. Maybe it's not 30, maybe it's 5, and you're kind of learning together and growing together. But yeah, I mean, do you guys have anything to add? I feel like there's probably a lot of misconceptions about networking.
I have one thing that comes to mind. It's kind of an anecdote that I experienced recently.
Yeah.
And it just highlights that your first impression with somebody is so important. Like when you're coming to a new town, to a town like Nashville or LA or wherever it is, whatever community, your first interaction with that person is kind of what will set the tone for their feeling about you. And I had just a really weird experience with a guy from LA. I'm not obviously going to say who it was, but at the end of the set, we had done a write. And this isn't a guy that was like brand new. Like, judging by the cuts and stuff he's had, you would think he wouldn't be as green as he was in some ways. But just a lot of relational kind of disawareness of like how to, handle a co-writing relationship. And at the end of the ride, it was even just he had made like a really big ask that he might have not thought was a big ask, but he was like, hey, after we finish this, like, would you mind sending me your Pro Tools template? I'm learning to, trying to learn to get this production thing and move here. And I was like, I kind of didn't know what to say at the time, because that's like my secret sauce as that's the thing I've spent 20 years kind of building. It might not sound like that, but like your template and your workflow and your plugins and your stuff that it's like your palette, it's your custom palette. So I was like, okay, if that's the first thing I've experienced with this guy is a massive ask. And I told my publisher about that, and he was like, yeah, that's kind of weird. And then, so it just highlights the power of the first impression. And I'm always, I hope anybody who listens to this knows that I'm open-handed. And there's not really any secrets, but stuff like that is like that is your that's what sets you apart as a producer. So first interaction is everything.
And I feel like on interaction and like impression in general too, I feel like some people think that like one impression, whether good or bad or whatever, is gonna be enough, but I feel like more than that, it is consistency, and it can be following up, not to a cringy weird point, of course, but following up, building that kind of relationship. Like, it's hard when you meet a lot of people. You can meet 100 people, and so it's like it's not necessarily about who it's kind of about who knows you. I feel like in some ways of like, can you leave a lasting impression is and building that kind of consistency too. For sure. With people. But
no, that's really good. And I think brings up just the importance of serving others, like, again, really needing to build that relational equity before there's any ask, if there's ever an ask, if there's ever an explicit ask. But like, what are some of those ways of building relational equity, I think is such an important like kind of question to consider and ask. And I think it just takes time, like you said. And I love, there's a book by Mark Maxwell, for those listening, if you haven't heard of him, who's an incredible lawyer.
He was on the podcast, actually.
Yes,
so people can go back and re-listen to that.
Yes, go listen to that. But he has an incredible book called Networking Kills, Success Through Serving. And so if you're looking for a read, it's really a great resource that just talks through like, what does it look like to serve those around you, whether that's your co-writers, whether that's people in the industry, where you really just get to come with an attitude and a mindset of learning and serving, and just the importance of that. Again, not even in a, like, it feels so counterintuitive to even say it out loud, but nonetheless, just because it can so often be the case in the music industry, not in a manipulative way, but in just a genuine coming, how do you come genuinely with a heart to learn and some practical advice for putting your heart in that place and then being able to walk out of that place. So yeah, Seth, can you talk a little bit about where to even, like, I'm sure there are some people asking like, well, where do you even find creatives to work with and find your tribe?
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're talking in this month, our theme in Song Chasers is producer relationships. So I'll just use that as an example for this conversation. But if you are an artist, then you are going to need to be connecting with producers to help bring your records to life. If you're a songwriter, you're going to need to be connecting with producers who are going to pull you into sessions. You're going to need to be connecting with artists who you can write with to get songs out there. And if you are the producer, you're going to need to be connecting with great writers to make sure you're producing, because it's not enough just to make your production sound good. The songs have to be great. Like, there's nothing we can do, me and X as producers, to fix a song that's just innately bad from the beginning.
Yep.
So you're going to have to be connecting with songwriters, and you're also going to have to be connecting with artists, of course, finding clients, finding people to work with. And so I'll just use that as an example. And really the best answer to that, it may seem super basic, but it's just social media. I think Instagram really is one of the most powerful tools. Obviously, TikTok in music is huge. If you're a producer who's kind of scouting out new talent, new clients, new artists to work with, you got to dedicate and block out time. Like, just call it your scouting time. Like, this is the time I'm going out and I'm specifically blocking out maybe 30 minutes a day or whatever you can afford to do. Find people who, it doesn't matter how many followers they have, just find people who you like what they do. And in fact, you'll probably have a lot more luck reaching out to them if you're newer and they don't have 1 million followers, of getting a response from them. So just find people who you think are great and send them DMs. It's literally not any more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And that goes both ways, whether you're a producer, whether you're an artist, whether you're a songwriter. Artists, the best advice I would have there is just go on Spotify and see who produced records that you like. You may do your own scouting and man, that artist or this person has a record that sounds amazing. Who produced that? Do your research. Producers are usually pretty accessible and songwriters are especially accessible because songwriters nowadays are so desperate to get songs cut because it's so hard.
Yeah.
So do your research on Spotify. There's obviously, the live in-person stuff, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I would say digital online, you don't even have to leave your home. You can be doing this in your pajamas in the middle of the night. And there's really no excuse. It's just a matter of doing it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And honestly, it brings up a different misconception, kind of going back to that question of, I think a lot of people who are not in a music city center like Nashville, like LA, like New York, often are most prone to asking that question of, well, I'm not there. So if I'm not there, how can I connect with people? Maybe they live in a small town in the middle of nowhere and there's just not a music scene around there, or the music scene around them is this one bar that they get to play at on weekends or something like that. And so I feel like social media is, again, one of those great avenues that kind of opens up a window and has just increasingly been a reminder that you can connect with other people virtually. And Riley, can you speak a little bit more to some of those other ways that people who are outside of a music city center really can find other collaborators?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, join Song Chasers. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I'm not kidding.
Not kidding.
But also,
I'm not kidding.
shameless plug.
No, and which we could definitely talk about that later. But like similarly, finding your kind of online communities, obviously, whether that is through social media, it could be an SAI. There are so many kind of online avenues to kind of jump into, we've hosted virtual writers rounds and stuff like that. And so, which can be like a niche thing that something like Nashville does, obviously. But yeah, just really leveraging those kind of online platforms and building those communities. And then, yeah, being proactive and reaching out, kind of like you were saying, whether it is shooting someone a DM or an email or whatever, and kind of just building that tribe. And I know a lot of people are doing this too, outside of like Full Circle kind of, but hosting kind of like writing retreats and writing camps. I know a lot of people that kind of are in our circle, whether that's in Florida or Ohio, you hear about small little retreats and, little camps kind of breaking out and forming in these little pockets of the country, which is really, really cool to see that it's kind of like a piece of Nashville in different corners.
For those of you who just heard like 3 buzzes.
Yeah, I know. I was like, that distracted me a little bit.
We're all
Sorry.
getting blown up with this is real life flash flood warnings. So.
Yeah, classic. Y'all know it's still happening.
Sorry,
Last thing I would
Becky.
say is, and I don't feel like a lot of people in our community do this, but planning strategic trips. Obviously, there is no kind of community like Nashville, and I think people definitely realize that, and so people love that kind of spark, that's creative spark and energy that they find here. And so I think a lot of people, I find, planning a week or 2 weeks and just taking that time, taking full advantage, setting up co-writes, attending those writers round, maybe even playing a show, meeting up, setting up coffees, doing all of the things, just really taking advantage and kind of planning those trips when you have the time and availability, of course. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Kind
I
of a
love
couple things.
kind of what you highlighted, or one of the things you highlighted is basically, if you can't find community, create it. Like, get creative. Like, you're creative. Get creative in finding a way to create community, whether that is with just a handful of people, in your hometown. I know someone who's kind of been around our Song Chasers world for a while, his incredible Christian hip hop artist named Connor Flanagan. And, he's up in Minnesota, and his creative community it looks really different from Nashville, but he's done an incredible job at pulling together creatives through his church in the area, putting together shows, putting together writing opportunities for those who are in his circle. And, he still comes to Nashville. He still makes trips. He still does all the other things, but he's formed that right where he is. And I think that's also something a lot of times people forget, whether that's like there's no place to do a show. Okay, do you have a church? Do you have a worship pastor who believes in you and would be willing to put on a worship night that allows you to showcase your song? Like, get creative, I think, too, is such just something you kind of highlighted, which is really cool. Kind of spiraling back a little bit, Seth, I loved how you started talking about kind of the producer relationship and what it looks like to form those. X, I feel like something you're really good at is just forming authentic relationships with artists and collaborators and other people. Can you speak a little to what that journey has looked like for you?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just being like you've heard a couple times already, just being genuine, like being yourself. I think when I get messages from people, now reaching out to me, it's really easy to tell like who's genuinely just wanting to like talk to you, who's not putting on airs or something. Like it's like, hey, how are you doing? How's life going? They've looked up something about you, so they know a little something to ask a question that seems kind of poignant or something. I think just being genuine is like the foundation of actually establishing a relationship. There's not asking something right away of people. It's just like, for me, it's just always been like reading the room, understanding who you're around and how you can meet them where they're at. I think that's just been the key to like how I've found building relationships with people, as producers, especially when we're interacting with the artist during extremely vulnerable times too, in their creative process. Like when you're in the vocal booth, having people sit there in judgment of you is like a really intense place to be. So just, anything you can do to kind of just put them at ease, let them know like, hey, this is a safe space. I think that journey starts from the initial interaction. Like them getting into the booth begins with the first exchanges of like, hey, like if you can just disarm someone, like even if you're the one being reached out to, being able to just disarm someone with, hey, hey, it's great to hear from you. Like just having it be as important to you as it is to them, I think is a crucial piece. But just establishing like that rapport is just a matter of just being absolutely genuine, not just being like not demanding of someone's time. Like you get a lot of messages when people are like, I need to hear back by this afternoon on this. And like just me as a human, that stresses me out so much that I'm just like, I'm failing this person if I don't get back to them. And I'm a people pleaser. And it's taken me a long time to get to the point where I'm like, okay, saying, I'm sorry, I can't, pull this into my scope right now. But anyway, sorry, getting back to what you're asking. But I think it all begins though with just being genuine and just reaching, like just starting with like the open mind of actually wanting to establish a relationship with someone and not wanting it to be solely based around some objective or some goal that you have just like held in your mind.
Yeah, and who are you as a person? I think, that's in a nutshell, that's kind of what you were saying, but who are you as a person is going to make way more difference in getting you connected with people as opposed to your talent. Like you've got to have the baseline of talent, but it's who you are as a person.
They say it's like 10% talent, 90% who you are, like who you are in the
personality
room.
And how you handle yourself. Communication. I mean, it just brings me back to like the old book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Like if you struggle to make connections, then that can be a really helpful book with just how to interact. If you're more naturally an introvert, like things like that are actually really helpful. And not only connecting with people initially, but making those relationships last over time. Maggie, that's something I've seen you do really well over the years, and maybe you can speak a little bit to that. How do you nurture and keep really, really healthy, good relationships going over time that don't feel transactional, that feel genuine?
Sure. Yeah, I know. It's one of those questions that I feel like is a little weird to answer. I feel like similar to what you were saying, X, of just, because a lot of times it's like people become your friends over time. And so like, how do you describe becoming friends with someone? You know what I mean? And so it's a little bit of an interesting question to answer, but I think that in general, like one of the biggest things, similar to what you were saying, X, is just checking in on people, seeing how people are doing and not being afraid to, again, not in a weird way, not in a asking for something all the time sort of way, but just literally checking in and being like, hey, thinking of you, how are you doing? Or, hey, saw you had this release, sounds awesome, love the song, things like that. Showing up at people's rounds, showing up for people's big moments, for their small moments. I think just showing up for people goes a really long way, the same way that it goes back to that mindset you were saying, Riley, of like, so often we think it's about gaining, but it's really about giving. And so just how can you be excited and cheer on other people in your circle, I think is one of the biggest things. And this is a little bit of an adjacent thought, but something that I more so I feel like I have found fun is also then getting to be a connector of other people. I feel like that's also gone a long way. Personally, I just find it fun, but to be able to be like, oh, I have this friend and this person, they should meet, and I don't even have to be there, but they should probably meet. I think that also, is one of those things that builds trust, and it's just as a reminder to people that you really are for them. So yeah, those are, I don't know, kind of some of the things that come to my mind immediately.
Yeah, that's so good.
But,
well, and you're also going to encounter, the thing that just kind of goes without saying is with relationships and with the industry, you're going to encounter a lot of rejection. Mm-hmm. You're going to encounter, maybe not so much even overt rejection. Probably 99% of the time, it's just somebody won't get back with you. Mm-hmm. Or you send a song over and they pass on it, or they just don't respond, or, you do a single write and then you don't get invited back in the room to do another write. Like, rejection looks more like that usually than somebody sending you a letter and saying,
yeah,
it's your submission has been declined.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Although sometimes I wish it was that black and white.
Yeah.
But you gotta just learn to not take it personally.
Yeah.
I think that's so much of it, is knowing that like your work and your creativity and your art is not you. It's not who you are. It's not your identity. I think all of us as creatives struggle with that, in decoupling those two things. But the more you can do that over time, we had Tom Douglas on a couple episodes ago on the podcast, and he just talked about it so well, and has over the years, his 40, 50 year career at this point, really, having to learn that your songs are not your babies, that your art, your pieces of art, your works of art are not your babies. You have to just be willing to put it out there, let it go, and the people that you are meant to work with are going to be brought into your path. God's going to bring the right people into your path who you need to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. And I think too, yeah, like you said, if it's not one relationship, if it's not one place that you end up kind of finding your tribe, like it'll be another. Like you just have to keep looking. And again, too, if you do continuously run into issues, take a look in and be like, I wonder if it's me. But also, again, not in a holding it too personally way, but just in an open-handed sort of way. And so to back up a little bit, I feel like something that a lot of people we've come across in the industry or in Song Chasers, like kind of that first step, that first interaction, like what are ways of being creative in the ways that you can add value to other people. I know that's something I personally have found a lot of value in is internships, just the power of interning with people. That's how I ended up at Full Circle to begin with. Best thing I've ever done, maybe. So grateful. But Riley, I know too, I feel like, been in so many environments, seen so many different things. What are some things you would add to just creative ways for people who are looking to take that first step or are farther in can add value?
Yeah, I feel like, honestly, we've touched loosely on a lot of these things, and it'll just be reiterated. And you actually said my first point that I was going to say, and I was literally going to make a point of this by saying that Maggie is such a great connector. And I was going to say that was going to kind of be my first point, is to be that person and to connect, to be, just be a connector. If you know somebody looking for another co-writer or a content creator or a producer or whatever, and you kind of have these connections and kind of just pulling them in, that can be an amazing tool, and you do an amazing job of that. And so I was going to say that's definitely something. Something else I was going to say too would be kind of offering your skills. I feel like in networking, instead of asking for favors, it can sometimes like lead to a better connection when you're like, hey man, like I see that maybe you need some help with XYZ, or like, hey, I'm in the business of doing some social media work or this or whatever you kind of do, whatever you feel like your strengths are. If you ever need some help with your social media strategy or whatever, like I'm down to help. And sometimes that can often, lead to more of a genuine connection of you, offering yourself to help kind of first. And then, yeah, we already kind of touched on it, supporting their work, showing up for, release shows or writers round, or, yeah, even the small moments, kind of behind the scenes stuff. But, yeah, just supporting, I feel like, kind of naturally strengthens relationships and friendships in general. And I feel like sometimes I've learned that it's not about the grand gestures as much as it is like the smaller things. I feel like we've talked about that a lot too. You don't have to go and offer some crazy thing to get them to notice. Sometimes it really is just, like I said, offering, hey, I want to take a look at your social media. Hey, buy you a coffee. Hey, just the small little things that they will really notice over time. And then, yeah, a couple other things I even wrote down for this. Being a great listener. Obviously, I feel like people just love to be heard, to be seen in a lot of ways when they're going through stuff, or just want to talk about their music, want to talk about XYZ, whatever's going on. And so I feel like people will want to keep working with you if they feel like you're just a great, like, active listener. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of this is kind of just reiterating what I've already said, give without expecting. Yeah. Anything you feel like you would add to that?
No, I think you hit it right on the head. It's one of the great things. So shifting gears a little bit. So once you kind of have formed those relationships, once you're in the right, once you're collaborating, working on a project together, Riley, can you speak a little bit to just kind of how to prepare for a co-write well, to set yourself up for success?
Yeah, gosh, so many things. I feel like could be a couple different things, whether you know your co-writers or you don't. 'Cause sometimes you're walking in with new co-writers that maybe you really don't know much about them. You don't know about the dynamic. You don't know maybe about what they've done before. And so this doesn't apply there. But if you do, and whatever, maybe that is doing your research. Maybe that's seeing kind of if they've had any cuts, what songs, kind of where are their strengths and all of that. And just how you can best complement the other writers or the artist in the room, especially if it's an artist, going to look at their discography and just kind of checking out what they do. Do you have context for what you're going to be doing that day? Maybe you don't, and that's totally fine and can be totally normal, but maybe it is a specific worship project, or maybe it is a writing for this artist project or whatever. And so kind of, I feel like having context can also really help prepare you for maybe you sit down and have a kind of idea session, or as a producer, maybe you're having like a little, like Seth has little vibe sessions, where you're kind of creating these music beds and kind of just vibes. And so maybe you have a session where you sit down and you're just coming up with melodies. Maybe it's coming up with hooks, and maybe you can tailor that towards, the specific artist or these specific co-writers, or maybe you just don't know. But I feel like that in itself, having the melody bank, having the idea bank, having the note on your phone with all of the things can be really helpful, because I feel like it really only takes one time to show up unprepared. You'll probably only do it once if you walk into a co-write and you've got nothing. And maybe everyone else has nothing, and then you feel the write is dragging and it's slow and it feels just hard, and you're like, why did that not go well, So I feel like being overly prepared can just kind of, maybe nobody else has something, but you've got 5 ideas, and so ultimately that will move the write along, even if no one else has anything. So I feel like just being prepared in that way, and then being open-minded. Talked about this a lot recently. I feel like being flexible, open-handed with how the write may go. You don't know. Not every write is going to be the best one. It's not always going to feel like, oh, we just really, really killed that one. So I feel like being flexible and open-minded can kind of sometimes help with those feelings. And then, I feel like this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, like kind of knowing your role in the room. Sometimes it's not always clear, but I know, Seth, we kind of talk about this a lot. A lot of times you kind of are acting as the track guy, acting as the producer, but also a writer in the room, and maybe you've got a clear artist and a clear top liner, but kind of knowing where you're sitting that day. Maybe it's not always clear, but I feel like most times it can be. So, but that can always just be helpful. Knowing the goal can kind of help shape how you walk into it a little bit. So, so just maybe a couple of things can be helpful before a co-write.
Yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely. That's good. And I'd love to hear too, like, Seth, from a producer standpoint, like how do you guys prepare for artists coming in to record vocals, to whatever it is you guys might be doing that day, work on a track? What does that look like from the production side?
I think it's really different depending on what you're actually doing that day. But I think two of the biggest things is being prepared for whatever it is. It's like if you're going into a tracking day, like a band tracking day, have the demos already. Like if you don't have stems for the band to listen to kind of get an idea, rip them apart using like Moises.ai, like being ready on on that side of things. Like production and songwriting for that matter is really a rapid-paced creative process. So the less time you're spending like, give me 10 minutes, I got to do this. Like if you're doing a vocal session, have the tracks ready for cutting the vocals to. Have the song in a place where they're going to be excited to sing it. From just a more mental side of it, I think one of the biggest things for me is just like when I cross into the room where I'm working, trying to leave anything else that's going on in my life outside of the door, which is not always possible, but I try to do as much of it as I possibly can, just because when I come in here, it's not necessarily about me or my stuff or anything. It's about what we're all doing together. But especially if it's a vocal and an artist that you've never worked with, you want to create that safe space, that safe environment. I've been a part of all kinds of vocal sessions. I personally think, especially if it's someone I've never worked with, that positivity, like, leads better than anything, like trying to be encouraging.
You're great at that.
Well, thank you.
Literally the best.
And, some artists really like feedback and like you to push them and all that stuff. But I think there's ways to do that positively too. But especially if you've never worked with them before, you don't know. And so you don't want to just say something that's going to just crush their spirit in there. And it could be something that you just think is nonplus, just like, hey, we're still, if you're trying to joke or something, a lot of times like that piece of glass there and the record button, they cloud people's judgment into what's like sarcasm or a joke. It's just like being straightforward, being positive, pushing in the direction that you want. I think a big part of the preparation process too is just we have calls, like, so we have a direction in mind. We have references in mind. So just knowing like what that direction is, what those references are, can really help you just steer the ship in a way that's just like, okay, yeah, I can ask them to get to this place without being like, oh, by the way, we're still in the key of F, and if you want to just turn the click up a bit, maybe we'll start getting something we can keep. You don't want to be like laying in like that. It's just like,
sure.
Hey, that's killer. But what if we look at it like this? Or what if we try maybe doing this? What if you smile more? What if you put a little more emphasis on these consonants? Just little things that are just like, you're suggesting, you're helping, you're inflating them rather than being like, that was terrible, let's do it again. Because I think on our end, we can, like, you can't fake the performance. You can fake the timing pretty much. You can fake the pitch of it for the most part, like, but you can't fake the emotion and stuff in it. And I know, like, especially on days when you're doing the demos of songs you've written, a lot of times we end up using some of those vocals from that day because there's just a magic in the, like, the performance
the
or whatever.
They don't have time to overthink it.
Yeah.
Is basically what it comes down to. It's just the initial reaction to what they're feeling.
Yeah.
So, man, that's great stuff, X. I want to talk a little bit about kind of once we're in the room, and you hit on that a little bit, but specifically in a co-write, a lot of people aren't necessarily sure how to handle themselves. And I know, Maggie, you're so good about this, just unspoken co-write etiquette. Can you speak to that and maybe just give a few tips on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to depend a little bit, kind of like Riley said, on the dynamic of, are you with friends, people you've written with before? Are you with new people you haven't written with before? I love, X, how you kind of touched on kind of leaving other things outside of the door and being able to really like focus in on your time there. And I think that's one kind of unspoken rule that is often forgot, is to not be on your phone all the time, to not be checking in on all the other things going on outside the room, but to be able to really focus and pour in on what's in front of you and, showing up on time, being just adaptable. I think too that one of the, I wouldn't even say this is necessarily an unspoken rule, but I think it's one of the things I have, at least personally, from a top liner perspective in particular, found so helpful, and maybe one of the most helpful things in writes, whether it's a friend that I'm familiar with or whether it's someone new I'm writing with, is just asking questions, like not being afraid to just continuously ask the artist questions about how are you doing, but in terms of like your artistry, creativity. What are you feeling right now, like, that you want to write about? Just not being afraid to ask too many questions. Obviously, maybe there's a point where you can hit too many, but I think remembering that the artist is ultimately the person you're trying to serve, whether you're a top line or a producer. I think sometimes, especially if you're newer to co-writing and not familiar with writing towards a specific target, that can be something that is forgotten and thrown out the window. There have been a couple writes I've been in where maybe one person has a really awesome idea, but it's not what they want to say. And so kind of navigating that tension and just really bringing the focus back to, okay, but what does the artist really want to say there? And maybe there's a way as a top liner, producer, whoever might be in the room, of helping them rephrase it in a way that's going to be able to resonate with people even better, but really trying to meet the artist and where they're at and what they are trying to say, I think is one of the biggest things that I see sometimes is forgotten or just isn't focused on enough, and has been the most helpful. So,
and if you are the artist, not being afraid to say what you want.
That. Yeah, absolutely.
Like that's what, as not the artist, as a producer, and the writers I work with, like we want the artist to say what they like and what they don't like.
Yeah.
There are times when you kind of, you're in the room with a Tom Douglas or a Tim Nichols or a Jimmy Erie or any of these guys who are just kind of legends in their craft. And there are times when the artist should probably defer to them.
Sure.
Just because they're way better writers.
Yeah.
However, what none of us want is for the artist to feel like uninvested in the song, so that by the time they leave the writing room, they're like, I really don't care about that. That doesn't feel like a me thing.
Yeah.
Like that's not really serving anybody.
Yeah.
So that's just something to add to what you said from the artist perspective, that don't be afraid to speak, your opinion on, do you like this? Do you not like it? Just steer the ship in as balanced way as possible while listening to the people around you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you bring up the point too of like, what do you do when there are creative tensions in the room? Seth, I don't know if you have any thoughts or ways of speaking to when those disagreements come up, the best ways to kind of navigate those in a co-write situation.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, most of the disagreements aren't had even in the room. It's more like, and this is different when you're just starting out. If you're newer to co-writing, if you're newer to collaboration, and you don't really know how you fit in this whole ecosystem and how this whole thing works, there probably are going to feel like there's more tension. There's going to be more disagreements. It's going to feel like you're operating a machine without the oil in it. And then the longer you do it, the more it feels like it's just moving, it's rolling. Like if somebody says no, none of us are having the ego to dig our heels in, unless it's just like, we know, like let's say 2 out of the 3 people in the room are like, this is the thing. Like then the third person should probably get on board some way, but most of the disagreements in my experience are had either after the fact or just some kind of a miscommunication, whether it be writer splits, whether or not a song should go a certain way production wise. Oftentimes I'll be on text threads with people who will have 2 different opinions on something the demo should do, and oftentimes it's just trying to find a creative compromise somewhere in the middle. And that's really what co-writing and collaboration is for it to work effectively, there has to be some creative compromise. It can't just be 100% your way or the highway. Like it has to be a meeting of the minds, so to speak. So, usually everything can be resolved with just straight up communication. If that doesn't work, and in the very, very few times I've ever had that experience, then that's why we have people like entertainment attorneys and managers to step in and kind of help diffuse situations. And that's, they're just so good at what they do in that standpoint. So I would say really avoiding the disagreement in the room is your first step. Just being more, making it more of like a yes and environment. obviously there is the risk that with every write you're going to walk away feeling like, oh, that's not something that I would do, or that's maybe not the thing I'm the most proud of. But that's okay. Like, not every song, and in fact the majority of the songs that we do aren't going to be this world-changing amazing thing. It's just we're all doing the best we can. And so I think just having grace for each other in the room, listening to each other, not digging your heels in too much. If you feel like you're stuck on this one idea and the other people in the room are not on it, just put it back in your idea box and come back to it later.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think another specific question or tension that sometimes, honestly, maybe people are more worried of than, at least I know we've talked about kind of as a team, actually tends to come up. But Seth, can you speak to, I know a lot of people have a fear of kind of the splits that happen in co-writing, and just can be afraid that there's going to be disagreements over that. Can you speak a little bit to your relationship with co-writing splits and how to have a conversation about that, when to have a conversation about that?
Yeah, I mean, the way that we do it in Nashville, and I would say how I think everyone in the world should probably do it, just because it avoids a lot of heartache and a lot of, relational drama, is we always do even splits. Unless there's some pre-agreed situation where it's going to be otherwise, I think every song in my catalog with Sony is all even splits. Like, there's not a single song out of those 500 songs where it's not even splits. And you may hear that and you may think, well, what if I wrote 90% of the lyric on the song? Well, that may be the case. But there are also going to be some days where you write 10% of the lyric on the song, and it all balances itself out. I'm not a fan of word counting. I don't like it when people say, I remember when I came up with that line on that song, or I remember when it's just distasteful to me. And I think it just can come off as, cocky and, not just, it's just a turnoff for most people in this creative community. Nobody wants to be with the person who's always trying to take credit for everything.
Yeah.
And the reality is like co-writing is such a weird, it's weird. It's a weird process. We're just sitting in a room and trying to think until something happens, right? It's just like thinking up magic and chasing it and ultimately trying to download stuff from God. And it's such a weird process that I think the more we try to kind of control and put parameters around it, the worse it gets. So that's where, to me, the even splits mentality just diffuses all of that. The only place where it's going to maybe be a little different is when you're talking about like the film and TV and the sync world. And that's where there's going to be two sides of a license. Like if a song gets placed in a movie or a TV show or video game, there's going to be your publishing side that goes to the writers on the song, and then there's going to be the master side, which goes to, usually the producer and the artist or whoever's singing it. The master side isn't always even splits because most of the time the producer is the one kind of doing all of the work and in many cases paying the cost associated with finishing the track. So, but on the songwriting side, there's, 99.999% of the time, I just encourage people to do even splits.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. And I love how I feel like we've kind of talked through the process here of, finding the collaborators, finding the co-writers. Okay, you're in the room, you're producing, you're writing. What does that look like? And so kind of pivoting the conversation then a little bit to after the songs are written, what does it look like to kind of make opportunities for those songs? And so I know a lot of people, especially whether in Nashville or outside of Nashville, honestly, have a lot of questions about, well, how do you get those songs then heard by music publishers, by A&R reps? Like, how do you do that? And so Seth, I don't know if you can speak a little bit to that. Like, what does it look like to then get those songs heard after the write?
Yeah, that's that's the $1 million question. And there are also a million answers to that question. I would say in terms of getting in touch with publishers, a lot of them have a rule where they don't just accept unsolicited submissions, because what can happen is you might send something and then they pitch a song and it gets cut and it sounds like the thing you sent them. That's a liability that you could sue them, because you could say, oh, this publisher heard my idea, and then they had their writer rewrite it. A lot of the times that's just out of the question. So you really have to go through trusted channels, people who have the relationships with publishers, and that could be another co-writer, could be another producer, it could be an attorney friend of yours, a manager friend of yours, or, you know, again, Song Chasers. We provide pitch to publisher opportunities, and that's one of those things that I don't think people realize how big of a deal that is.
Yeah.
I think people in our community do, but a lot of people don't realize, like, that's, you know, even if the publisher is not offering you a publishing deal, just the fact that they're hearing your stuff, they're always listening for who's going to be the next writer that I'm looking to sign.
Yeah. And
if they hear something that they love and they hear it consistently from this person, they're going to probably reach out to you. I always like to say that the work kind of speaks for itself, but having a trusted source, a trusted connection, you know, in terms of pitching to labels, I mean, that's really hard. And honestly, I don't even necessarily encourage people to do it at this point. I don't really think there's a point to it. I think you're better served as an artist in just going out and building your own audience on TikTok. And labels have people that are constantly scouring and scouting. That's literally what they do 8 out of 10 hours of the day, is
Right.
they're looking for the next thing. So they're going to find you if you have something that pops.
Yeah.
If you're a writer or producer, you know, that may be a little different conversation in terms of connecting with labels. And, you know, at that, it's just going through a trusted source. You can always send DMs. You can always, you know, like we talked about earlier, there's no harm in doing that. Finding who are the labels behind it, going and doing your research on, you know, Billboard magazine or Music Row magazine or any of the industry trade publications. You can find who these executives are, the A&Rs behind these projects, who are the ones in the pictures with when they get the number one party. Like the publisher and the A&R are probably going to be in the picture with them. So building relationships with them and just sending them DMs, that's really about all you can do. But at the end of the day, there's got to be something there that they get excited about, and they're going to come to you.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a great point about them coming to you. I think something that a lot of times is forgotten, and honestly something we get questions in our support email about all the time, is we often get the question of, like, how do I sell my songs? And they expect that they can just, the term selling your songs is kind of a funny one, because that's not.
Yeah, maybe you could dispel that really quick.
Yeah. Selling your songs isn't really how that typically works. You know, if you have a song that's done well over a decade and has a lot of, you know, viability moving forward, and you're later in your career, maybe there's a chance to sell a song. That might be the case, but that is just about never the case for a new writer. And really, what kind of to reshift the mindset, it's about having your name, being a part of songs that you've co-written with for artists. That's the way you get your songs cut these days. It's a lot less about pitching, a lot more about, again, being a part of those co-writes and getting your songs heard that way. And to your point then, Seth, of, you know, people finding you rather than you finding them, like, again, great if you can reach out, forming authentic relationships. But if you're going to do that, like, have something to back it up, like, you know, to, like, be like, yeah, I've been working all these things. Like, hopefully you've had some friends, some artists start cutting your songs so that your name is already one that's familiar, or to the point of our Song Chasers pitch to publisher sessions, you know, or pitch to artist sessions, whatever they might look like. Even when a song isn't cut or whatever, part of the win of a publisher, of you even having your song pitched and getting that feedback is, you know, that happens enough and your name starts to stand out. People start to know, like, oh yes, I remember that person. They wrote this really great song last time too. Or I know that this is kind of the thing that they're going for. And just having that familiarity with people in the industry is so important. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, but...
No, I have nothing to add. You said it really well.
Riley, I don't know too if you have any other kind of ways of getting songs heard in your experience, both as a songwriter, in marketing, other things you've seen in Song Chasers. Are there any other kind of creative ideas or things you've seen about ways people can kind of get their songs heard?
Gosh, yeah. Being so immersed in social media and that kind of side of marketing, I feel like that's kind of where my head lives, at least currently. And so, yeah, because I mean, ultimately, you don't want to like push like your songs down people's throats, you know, like it's not something you want to kind of force on people. want them to like it authentically. And I think it's something the artists that I am currently working with, we are constantly having to balance the idea of like, gosh, not to go back to like selling your song, but kind of like selling your song on socials is like, are we doing too much promoting? Are we doing too much this and like forcing it at them rather than kind of like creating this natural and authentic content rather than having it come across as like in a way salesy and too marketing, right? Like whatever, because there can be too much of that in some cases. And so I think we're always trying to kind of find that balance of let's show our personality, let's be genuine, let's be authentic, but also we are still trying to promote the song, but not too much, you know, and it is really hard to find the balance between the algorithms and between, you know, gosh, the saturation of kind of artists and writers being on TikTok and Instagram and all kind of trying to find that kind of spotlight and be discovered or be found or whatever kind of the goal is for people these days. Yeah, I'm not really sure what my point was with all of that.
It was a great point.
There.
Because I think people, you know, if they take online courses from how to market yourself or how to sell yourself, in music and anything in art, it's very different. I don't think fans, publishers, labels want to ever feel like they're being sold from a musician, from a singer. Like there's a tendency for people to take a marketing course and then go and do, you know, these videos that feel like it's somebody who's on the Home Shopping Network trying to sell something, like an infomercial, you know. And I've seen a lot of that because there's tons of people teaching music marketing online, and that a lot of it doesn't work because the tone comes off feeling like that. And I think people just kind of, it just feels icky. It just, you kind of sense it.
Especially when people are trying to like sell you a formula, like this is the formula that's going to get your songs heard on social media. And like, that's not always the case. Maybe it worked for this one person and they went viral and cool. Well, but it doesn't work for everybody.
The truth is there is no formula.
And there truly, and whatever it is, it changes weekly, daily, whatever. And so it's like, there is no perfect thing.
If there was a formula, it would be all that every label would do all the time, but there isn't that.
And you just kind of have to find your thing, what works for you and your, you know, genuine and authentic way of kind of promoting your songs and staying true to whether it's your artistry or songwriting or whatever. Because, it's a balance, but kind of trying to show your heart in your content. I feel like just trying to be genuine, because people do, like you just said, people will see through it. Like they can see through like, you set this up so perfectly and it's like overly perfect and it's overly, you know, selly. It's just a little too in your face, and you just want something that feels a little bit more relatable.
Yeah, or entertaining. I mean, entertainment
funny.
is value. Like that's
people love the funnies, the bloopers, like the work in progresses too.
For sure.
Not even like the finished songs. I feel like a lot of songwriters are posting demos, and I feel like people eat that up. Even bigger artists these days are posting, you know, kind of work in progress demos, and people just, they love it. They love to be on that level with you.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
Can also be super beneficial to kind of show the imperfect too.
Yeah.
So
no, that's all great. And I think it's funny how easily I think we forget, like, just like, I feel like it's a kindergarten saying that they say, like, do unto others as you would like them to do unto you. You know what I mean? There's so much of that. It's like, market unto others as you actually really enjoy in your art. Like the artists you enjoy listening to the artists you enjoy listening to, like, are they super pitchy and overly marketing? Maybe not.
Maybe not.
So I know we talked a little bit about, you know, kind of what songwriters do, some ways of them connecting with industry professionals, music publisher, A&R reps. Seth and X, does that look a little different, or are there any things you'd like to add for what that can look like for a producer trying to break in and form those relationships?
Yeah, I mean, I think it looks kind of a lot different. I mean, for me, trying to establish those relationships when I first got to Nashville, it was so much word of mouth and like art. I mean, I think it's still true for us. Artists are kind of our biggest marketing push, because artists talk to other artists, and the experience they have with us, I think, permeates into like the people that they are around. I know for me, that's always been a really, you know, before I met Seth, and like when I was early on in my career, like I would work with a band, and all of a sudden I'm working with all their friends because their friends, like, either they had a great experience with me or they liked, how it sounded, or both, and then they came in. And I think we've met a lot of artists just through experiences other artists have had with us, and they're like, hey, we heard you guys were great. We're excited about the same thing. And, if you've written with them already, it kind of lays the groundwork for, like, how they kind of come into us. As far as label people go, I think that's something that's far more difficult. I think, anytime I've looked to have relationships, I was either finding names on websites or whatever, and then just, like, reaching out to people. But I always tended to have some degree of separation from them. Like, hey, my buddy so-and-so, works with, whoever at your space. I was just looking at the artists you work with. I love how they, I love what they're doing. Would love to, be able to sit down, get you coffee or something sometime, and just see what happens kind of from that direction. But I think, as far as just bringing people into our fold, word of mouth has been a very powerful thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, man, word of mouth really, if you're a producer, I mean, finding really good artists to work with, and this is different when you're starting out, but the place you want to get to is where word of mouth is the only marketing that you do. And word of mouth, another way of saying that would be somebody hears something that you worked on and they love it. Yeah. Like word of ear, if that's a term.
Exactly.
Sure.
Well, it is now.
Yeah, it's now.
So, but that's really it. Like, I didn't even really know what marketing was until just like several years ago when we kind of started the academy side of things, and we realized, you actually have to get the word out there with these types of things. But with something like production, the best clients to work with are going to be ones who heard something you did, they loved it, they came to you because they liked that. Yeah. Those are always going to be, end of the day, they're going to love what you do, number one. Number two, they're going to respect what you do, so they're going to listen to you if you have suggestions. And then number three, they're just going to be more excited about working with you. Yeah. So I think the word of ear is going to be the best way for producers to market, for sure.
No, that's great. No, I love that.
Yeah, it's awesome. Some great tips today.
Yeah. Really great conversation. Super fun for us to all be back. And hopefully anybody listening leaves with a few practical tips for whatever that next thing is for you. Also, just to list off, or again, starting points for people, some places to start to look for community. One, our Song Chasers community. It's really this whole conversation is really a huge part of why we created Song Chasers, was for people who are looking for community, obviously. And so, if you have any questions about that, always feel free to reach out to our team at support@fullcirclemusic, and we'd be happy to ask that. But even if your community isn't here with us, it's just a reminder, like, the reason we even have these conversations is because it does need to be somewhere. And so it doesn't have to be here, has to be somewhere. We'd be honored if it's here. In terms of some other places to look, writers' rounds, if you have any in your area, being sure to show up at those, supporting other people, playing yourself, going to shows. Again, for some people, it might be at church with their worship team or band. If you are in Nashville and you're in the Christian space, something that's really cool that's been happening is the Gospel Music Association increasingly is having all sorts of events, some songwriter meetups for up-and-coming songwriters to come to. So be sure to follow along at GMA socials.
Hosting one.
Yeah, we're hosting some stuff too here. Yeah. So what they're doing is awesome. In the country space, come down for CMA week. Go to where I lost it, but Tin Pan South is literally
just happened.
Tin Pan South just happened.
Yes.
NAMM show. There's an organization called No Name in the pop space in Nashville, which is a great place to go. There are Facebook groups. Check in with your PRO and resources they have, conferences they might be hosting. There's a Music Biz conference. ASCAP has a conference. Songtown is another educational resource that's great to plug into. So there's just kind of a list of some starting points too.
And if people wanted to jump in on Song Chasers, how would they best connect?
Yeah. Once again, if anybody has any questions, you can reach out to support@fullcirclemusic.com or go to joinsongchasers.com. And yeah, that's really where all the info is going to be to jump in.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
Good hanging with you all this morning.
Yeah, it's been fun. We made it.
We made it.
We made it through the storm.
We had a flood watch or warning, but we are still here, not washed away.
So not washed away.
Feels good.
We were going to have to build an ark here.
I know.
Maybe to get out of the studio.
Build a boat?
Yeah.
We might
have to.
No.
We might have to.
And with that, we'll catch you guys next time.
Yes.
There we go.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Made It in Music podcast. And be sure to check out our other episodes where we unpack hundreds of hot topics with some of the top music industry pros, both here in Nashville and all over the world. Subscribe to make sure that you automatically get future episodes, and leave us a review if you loved it. It would really help us out. Or send an email to support@fullcirclemusic.com if you have ideas for how we can improve the show. If you would like to become a Song Chasers member and attend our training sessions live, head over to joinsongchasers.com to learn more. You also get additional exclusive training from music industry professionals. You get our royalty-free custom tracks from Seth Mosley. You get song reviews from me and my team, and you get access to a custom social media network we created exclusively for songwriters and musicians. There's nothing else like it on the internet. Head to joinsongchasers.com to learn how to join, and check out madeitinmusic.com for more content and episodes from this podcast. See you in the next episode.